You're here in London to host the premiere of Never Forget Tibet, the Dalai Lama's untold story. Why do you think the story of his fleeing is so important to tell?
Well, the story of His Holiness the Dalai Lama is an extraordinary story. He was identified as the 14th incarnation of the Dalai Lama at the age of 2. And he became the head of the Tibetan state when he was 15. And then in 1959, he was born in 1935, he had to flee. There was an uprising in Tibet and a lot of violence. And he fled with 80,000 people and established a so-called government in exile. But all the while, he has never had any resentment. He's treated everyone with what the Buddhists call divine attitudes: empathy, compassion, joy, equanimity, loving kindness. He's probably the only leader in the world right now who's highly educated, philosopher, poet, interested in neuroscience, and not a religious fanatic either. He's a statesman, philosopher, and I think we need that kind of leadership in the world, and he's a perfect example, because as I look across the world right now, I find leaders engaging in power-mongering, influence peddling, cronyism, corruption, and greed. He's the exact opposite of that. So his story is very inspiring, and I hope will inspire future leaders.
Have you ever been fearful in terms of course, China has threatened anyone and anything, organizations, countries that recognize Tibet as being anything other than Chinese territory? And when you speak out in support of His Holiness,
my hope is that China will see that it is impossible to destroy a civilization or a culture that is so embedded for centuries, a culture that has caused so much good. China may see this as an opportunity, actually, to be magnanimous. They're not going to give back Tibet. That's, I think, even the Dalai Lama has accepted that. But freedom ultimately means the freedom to choose your philosophy, your religion, the freedom to choose your life. And anytime there are regimes that suppress freedom, ultimately they realize that long term it's not going to work. I think I'm not a politician. I don't want to get engaged in politics, but I do think it would be great if China was magnanimous in honoring the Dalai Lama and helping choose the next one. And you know, the last time I was in Shanghai, I was asked by an oligarch if I would visit any of the monasteries in Tibet. So I asked him, how come you're asking me this? He said, I own a few. I said, what do you mean you own a few? So he was the Chinese oligarch billionaire, and he actually did own a few, and he had made it a tourist industry. He was taking people to Tibet to see the monasteries. He had refurbished some of them, and actually the monks in those monasteries were living a very comfortable life. So I think if that was embraced more, that would be good for China and would be good for the world, and would definitely be good for this great civilization, this great culture that has contributed so much to the world.